SOS! They're taking us! I hope that this is not just a cry for help, but that we can alert everyone who's going through this abduction process. Many abductees are placed under a hypnosis process, a type of memory suspension, so that there is no memory of these attacks when people are taken from their homes after the experiments and manipulations.
Leon explained to me about the abduction process that took place with me and the woman. He informed me that she was from northern Italy and revealed her name, but here I will address her as Stefania. Leon said that her mother also underwent abductions in her youth, and that during Stefania's pregnancy there was manipulation, and she carried parts of the genetic coding of the Greys. He continued explaining to me that she was feeling restless and had a feeling of not belonging to this planet, in addition to missing a place that she couldn't explain. She also thought she was different from other people and longed to have contact with extraterrestrial ships and biological entities. Little did she know that this had been happening since her childhood, in fact since her mother's womb. Stefania was always making her attempts at connection, and since her pre-adolescence, she was always making her mentalizations, trying to make contact with beings from other planets. Every night she would leave the house and go near a plantation of vines and send mental messages to the universe. Like a trigger that just needs to be pulled, the connection happened by resonance and contact was established. The first contacts with the Greys took place in the astral body, and after a short time, she began to be taken out of the house. Stefania was taken several times to the Oval Room, the laboratory where experiments with children took place, but when she was returned, she couldn't remember anything. Unfortunately, she created this mental entanglement with them, having a resonance with these races, in addition to her DNA that was prone to the experiment according to the criteria of extraterrestrial research. Entering adolescence, she was groomed to become a host, and after her first period, when the reproductive cycle began, the Greys began the manipulation using her eggs, and since then, she has been regularly taken in for follow-up. Leon said that, because of this genetic code that Stefania carried, she had some mediumistic abilities, including telepathy and a very strong magnetism, but she had no understanding of her abilities or broader knowledge of spirituality. Leon continued explaining that there is a portion of humanity that has been visited by these beings from different locations, and that through genetic mapping of possible potentialities, some people begin to be abducted, so that there is a DNA cross between the chosen ones and their race. Many men and women have been taken in by some races, and unfortunately, they don't even have memories of these interventions. In a few cases, they only think that they had a very real dream in strange environments, and that they were even induced to perform sexual acts, and like laboratory rats, after the experiment, they are observed and monitored for the second macabre phase, when the woman who was abducted is fertilized in the laboratories on ships and monitored during the embryogenesis stage, shortly after fertilization, until the 13th week. It is at this moment that the embryo is removed, which is taken to their laboratories to finish the process of developing the fetus in technological wombs, and of course, to serve sinister purposes and projects from our point of view. Leon continued to inform me that in Stefania's case, and of course, as in many others, they removed her fetus and implanted another fertilized egg in her, placing an entrant, which is a parasite, would feed on both the embryo and the mother, and during pregnancy, the woman serves as a host. He explained to me that during the morula phase, which is when the fertilized egg, known as a zygote, transitions into a mass composed of about 10 to 30 cells, the entrant attaches to these cells and, like a parasite, begins to feed on the embryo that is developing until it takes its place in the umbilical cord that is being formed. From this stage, the entrant copies into its system the entire genome that will be transferred to the fetus, and then starts to feed on the mother's blood throughout the first trimester. After this period, the host woman is abducted again, and they remove the entrant that fed on the embryo, also receiving all its genetic load, and to continue the hybrid mutation within the laboratories, they transfer the creature to the technological cylinder/womb, and once again, that woman will be used until she has no more mature eggs. The information he gave me is that some women, when they go through the first experiment, can become infertile. It is as if the woman's own body, due to panic, caused her hormones to block and no longer produce eggs. Some start to have uterine problems because in some cases, the entrant in the parasitic process, in addition to feeding on the embryo, ends up clinging to the walls of the uterus, generating bleeding and causing the appearance of cysts, fibroids, and even cancer. That's why the subconscious of these women begins to reject the foreign body inside them, and some actually suffer a miscarriage, and in some cases, they report that their fetuses were in bad formation, but what they don't know is that they miscarried a hybrid species between humans and the Greys, or reptilians. I could understand that many things were fitting inside my mind, and I understood that others like me were going through this process. I met many friends who got married and their wives didn't get pregnant, but what they might not realize is that they were also serving as guinea pigs, and because of the process that collected their sperm, their testicles received a very strong magnetic charge, and the process of spermatogenesis was compromised for a long time, and they could not fertilize other eggs. These Greys and reptilians are somehow trying to circumvent the laws of the universe to safeguard their race, as they no longer reproduce like humans, since the war for control of a nano-consciousness between them and the Dracos. The so-called Orion War began for the power to control technologies by races that had not yet developed their own. It was not necessarily an invasion war to take control of star systems, as this would happen over time from the usurpation and control of the technologies of those that had already developed. But that's a theme for later. The agenda is premeditated, and there is the complicity of some governments, and even of religious sects, involved for a long time on Earth. Leon also informed me that other interstellar and interdimensional brothers had been visiting planet Earth as a mission for a long time, following more closely some humans who were going through the process of interventions and manipulations, as some were fractals of their networks, and who were deceived or would be trapped in the dome that controls this solar system. These fractals, due to the subjugation by the archontic beings that contaminated and manipulated the entire earthly experience, induced them to enter the reincarnation wheel, causing them to be affected by the veil of oblivion, numbing the capacities that were inherent to these fractals, and imprisoning them by Earth's telluric energy. It was exactly these fractals that were chosen, for the most part, for the abduction process, as they, being affected by the oblivion of their origins, due to the number of times they reincarnated, and the ego that began to take shelter in their minds, they were perfect prey. They were mapped and chosen, one by one, mainly because in their essence, there was the genetic code of their stellar ancestors, in addition to the charge of Earth humanity's genes. It was fertile ground for these evil beings to do their dark experiments. The purpose of manipulation was to absorb information, to give capabilities, and create new vehicles such as biological bodies, or biological robots, for the Greys and reptilians to transit with their minds on this planet, and feed themselves of this humanity as gods, which is on its way to becoming energy food, and servants in the nefarious web of what we call AI. Leon and the Federates, who are in favor of humanity, began to develop a program since the 18th century, establishing a project in which they could communicate with humans, without creating splurge, nor giving possibilities for them to be worshipped as gods, because they knew that this could be the biggest trap, as happened in the past of humanity, and that would end the program. Then partners from the dimensions closest to the planet began to arrive in this orb, and who would establish the first contacts and partnerships with the lodges and initiatic schools. In parallel, they sought in temples and spiritual colonies, coupled in various places of the earthly dimension, where they could find supportive brothers from their networks, who had already arrived in this location, since the Christ energy anchored on this planet. These elder brothers were recognized as spirits of light and ascended masters. They began a grandiose work, preparing the 19th century to receive the emergence of new initiatory schools and the spiritist codification, which would help a lot in the projects that were unfolding. There was a concern that a language could be reached that could be closer to the people, so that the older brothers could communicate with humanity, dressed in energetic clothing like pious velios, or old parents, indios, or Indians, caboclos, or mestizos, and other kinds of spirits. It was exactly in Brazil, in the 20th century, that they accompanied the emergence of the spiritualist movement, which would cover aspects of Candomblé, Umbanda, and Spiritism, and with that, they began their connections in all places where there were schools, lodges, centers, and spiritist houses, with the strategy of caring closely. But they could also heal, accompany, and assist many fractals that are on Earth, and since then, with the telepathy process, also do channeling and coupling as a type of incorporation. It definitely became easier to take care of and observe closely without causing damage, as the priority was, as soon as possible, to give paths to the awakening of consciences and help the planet Earth, which would begin to go through many attacks and anomalies. To be continued.